Daniel, DNA, and me. Before we get to Daniel, let's go back to one of my favorite verses involving the Antichrist given to us by John. Again, the vision given to John has a peculiar structure at times, and after introducing the Antichrist, suddenly there's an "oh yeah" section where more explanation is given because John is a bit confused, kind of like the reader. So John 17:7 reads, "And the angel said to me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundations of the earth, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. And here is the mind that hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. But when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast." Okay, H equals M equals K, and 5 plus 1 plus 1 equals 7 equals 8. Got it. This reminds me of when I'd have to explain grammar to clueless sophomores, and I'd cruise up to the desk and claim, "Oh, this is easy." Yet, chapter 17 is even worse. Because of just claiming it is easy, the angel says, "Oh, you got to be smart to figure this one out." Huh? The first condition explained by the angel is that the Antichrist has connections to the past, present, and future. This is explained 4 times. Was, is, shall, past, present, future. Next, the symbolism key is explained. 7 heads? They represent 7 mountains, but the mountains also represent 7 kings. Kings. 7. Got it? Then repeat it back to me. The Antichrist will have a connection to 7 kings. But which kings? Well, John is alive in the year 95 or so when he gets the prophecy. And the angel is pretty specific when he says 5 kings have already died prior to this equals was. One of the kings is currently living during your lifetime equals is. The 7th king will come later, likely close to the end, which means not yet come. Now, most of the remaining chapters in this book will try to figure out candidates for these 7 heads or 7 kings. It'll be fun. Yet in the previous chapter, I tried to explain what made the Antichrist such an abomination. My theory about the giants being an abomination since they were unnatural tried to connect to the flood fire prophecy. If there's any truth to this theory, is there any setup for it in Scripture? Oh, wait, I think I see it. Of the 7. How do you explain genetics to somebody born before the 20th century? For most of human history, we've never been able to look within a human to see the complex structure known as DNA. Even today, many American kids fail this test in science class. In chapter 17, the angel rolls up his sleeves to explain it to John. Confused, John? This is easy. The Antichrist is a genetic hybrid using samples of the previous Antichrist to make up an 8th being. Of the 7. The phrasing of the Antichrist being of the 7 is strange also. Why is it worded so weirdly? English translations have struggled with it. Look at popular ways they wrote it. The King James, the Aramaic, the ASV, the Marian, the Webster's, NEAT, World English, ESV, they write down of the seven. Young's Literal, or the LSV, out of the seven. The NIV, ASV, NRSV, Majority, HCS, CSB, didn't even know some of these existed, belongs to the seven. The NAB says really belongs to the seven. The Good News Contemporary Amplified Bible says of the seven. And the New Living Bible says like the other seven. The tame, lame interpretation of this is that there'll be some sort of connection between the seven kings from history and the eighth Antichrist, who will be the biggest baddie of all time. A connection like, oh, they're all evil. A slightly more ambitious interpretation of this passage is that there could be a family tree connection that puts all these sons of perdition into one big family tree. That's not bad. In fact, I really like that theory, but more for the prophet. Simply making the Antichrist the great-great-grandchild of some awful person doesn't rip the fabric of existence and upset God's view of his creation. Yes, it also involves genetics, but that perdition gene is carried through thousands of generations with only 8 occurrences of manifesting itself into something awful. That certainly doesn't seem like a trigger worthy of being labeled as an abomination kind of event. So perhaps there's something else. The world will marvel. A family tree? Check out the Jesus lineage. Even bad guys and girls had their part in the Jesus family tree. Cloning? Game changer. Everybody knows scientists like Dr. Frankenstein have been on the precipice of replicating life for the past few centuries. For the past 50 years, pop culture has slowly made us aware of this ability with movies like Jurassic Park as a cautionary tale. What if we threw caution to the wind? What if there were no moral parameters for genetic engineers? Could we clone someone? I'll save all of this speculation for the end of the book. Let's see if the book of Daniel goes into concepts resembling cloning. Daniel dumbed down. Like the book of Revelation, Daniel is about as complex as it gets. Because of this complexity, you can twist and shape it into about anything you need. Unlike Revelation, which was dropped in John's lap during a single day at the beach, Daniel contains several segments from several different time periods. It is not a single cohesive prophecy. With this caveat in mind, here is my dumbed down summary of Daniel. Chapter 1, a little bit about Daniel himself. Chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's Antichrist dream. Chapter 3, the golden image incident. Chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar's mental breakdown incident. Chapter 5, Belshazzar's writing on the wall incident. Chapter 6, the infamous Daniel in the lion's den incident. Chapter 7, Daniel's beastly dream of the future. Chapter 8, Daniel's odd dream of the future. Chapter 9, more of Daniel's odd dream of the future. Chapter 10, Daniel's continued dream of the future. Chapter 11, and more Daniel's dream of the future. And then Chapter 12, Daniel's end times dreams. As you can see, these 12 chapters jump between 4 different kings and cover a range of topics. Some of the chapters have no prophecies at all and just talk about stuff that happened to or around Daniel. Others are dreams of other people. It ends with Daniel's dreams of the future. Chapters 7 through 12 are problematic because it's tough to know specifically how far into the future they're talking. These chapters are easily twisted to mean anything you want them to mean. Jewish scholars would keep it historically BC. Christian scholars see it as both historical now and also prophetic. We're going to focus on chapter 2 in this chapter, and then later come back to chapter 7 when searching for clues about the 7 kings. Dreaming of an Antichrist. As I mentioned earlier in this book, I find it fascinating that King Chad the Bully dreams of an even bigger bully. Nebuchadnezzar was so troubled by what he dreamt that it brought Daniel into his life. Yet it wasn't Daniel's dream, it was Chad's. Ponder that for a minute. What purpose did it serve? Is this the equivalent of not letting your child watch an R-rated movie? God didn't want Daniel to dream it? Too much for him? Regardless, Nebuchadnezzar is given what Daniel refers to as the deep and secret things from God. He is shown the future, and it troubles him. So he tried to get somebody to explain this nightmare to him. Before Daniel is brought in for the explanation, Arioch declares to King Chad in Daniel 2:28, "But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days." So this prophecy is very specific. We're talking about the latter days, the end times. Are you ready, kids? So here's Daniel 2:31. "Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breasts and arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out of the hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them into pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth." This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. "Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the earth and the fowl of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over all. Thou art this head of gold, and after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, forasmuch as iron breaketh into pieces, and subdueth all things. And the iron that breaketh all these shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou saw the feet and the toes, part of the potter's clay and part of the iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron. Forasmuch as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but shall not cleave to one another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Forasmuch as thou sawest that stone which was of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure." So if I'm Daniel, where do I begin? That's a ton of information to explain in this passage. King Chad is freaking out. So if I was Daniel, I'd give him the most surface level explanation. Me. This monster you dreamed of is the Antichrist. He's not going to be here for a long, long time, but don't worry. God will smote him. King Chad. Why did he look so funny? Me. The different parts are to show you the passage of time. Beginning with you, the gold head, there's going to be, several different kingdoms that will pass. You and me will be long gone by then. But cheer up. God is going to smote him and set up his own kingdom that'll be described in chapter 21 of Revelation. King Chad, huh? Me. Oh, I'm sorry. Jumped ahead a bit there. Never mind. King Chad. So this dream and bad guy is all about the end times approximately 2,600 years from now? Give or take a few decades because of the Gregorian calendar. Huh? Oh, sorry. Never mind. Yes, a long time from now, King Chad. So I'm the golden head, which represents the present. The other parts of the scary dude represent the future. I think I got it. Since Babylon represents an evil empire that's harsh on the Jews, does this mean there will be other kingdoms coming that will be harsh on the Jews? I think you're onto something there, King Chad. Cool. If I'm the golden head, can I stop this prophecy from coming true by just building a great big golden statue that looks like me? No iron, no bronze, no clay, just 100% me. Are you jumping ahead to chapter 3? Oh, maybe. Can we focus only on chapter 2? I wanted to explain my theories on DNA to my readers. I'm ending this imaginary monologue now. Goodbye, King Chad. The seed of men. So, is King Nebuchadnezzar nuts? Nope. Daniel says the opposite when he says Nebuchadnezzar has tapped into some of the deep and secret things of God about the end times. In other words, this prophecy matters. This prophecy is predicting something very, very, very important. As we've already discussed, the Antichrist has many names and is mentioned in several spots of the Bible. Since his arrival is a trigger for the clock to count down the destruction of the world, he matters. Let's widen the lens a bit and look at what was shown in the dream. The Antichrist is made up of a bunch of different parts, isn't he? Ignoring the symbolism of the types of composition, this being is made up of others. Yes, it seems to be more of a linear timeline than John's chapter 17, but the visual, this is Dr. Frankenstein's monster. We're going to slap together different body parts to create this monster. Obviously, when you're making a human, you wouldn't use gold, iron, brass, or clay, would you? These construction materials can make swords, candle holders, or assorted coffee cups, but a human? To make a human, you'd need... Oh, wait, there it is. Seed. Ew. I'm not sure what sort of science classes were required of sophomores back in 538 BC, but most sophomore boys have discovered the basic biological workings of seed. I'm not certain of the symbolism of iron or miry clay, but I do understand why this vision involves seed. In order to make a human, you're going to need a little seed. Ew. Between Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Dolly the sheep, science didn't just discover DNA, but mapped it out to discover it was made of 23 chromosome pairings with 6.4 billion, applies pinky to lips, billion letters in the code. That's complicated. In the dark ages of the 1980s, I have to admit being a bit disappointed to learn that scientists couldn't just whip up something in a blender and pour it out. As an aspiring biotechnology major, my future consisted of flipping around a few of these 6.4 billion letters to create a mutant soybean. Starting from scratch, that's kinda hard. Tinkering? Much easier. So it makes sense that Chad's monster is glued together with the seed of men, with bits and pieces from others, to create this singular, unique creation. Abomination. We've already looked at Daniel's Abomination of Desolation trigger, but Daniel 12:11 is not the only time he mentions such a thing. Many historians think Daniel is garbage because its prophecies were so accurate. Their problem is that the visions came true. Babylon, followed by Persia, followed by Greece. In two different prophecies, Daniel called it. He saw Alexander the Great hundreds of years before he showed up. That's good stuff. Because it was so accurate, scoffers believe the book of Daniel was a poetic way of writing down the history after it happened. But what if it really was written before 538 BC? Double dang. Not only did Alexander the Great come true exactly as Daniel predicted, but that means the other stuff was likely going to happen also. This is why end-time scholars love this book. Not only did it predict Alexander, but it also predicted another bad guy, Antiochus Epiphanes. This is the main villain in the Maccabees saga. While we'll save him for another chapter, he did a bunch of stuff written in Daniel. Even though he had connections to the Abomination of Desolation trigger, and even did some bad stuff to the temple, another trigger, Jesus set his disciples straight when he referenced this prophecy as something that has not yet happened. Yet, my 5 + 1 + 1 = 7 = 8 theory, pay attention to Antiochus Epiphanes is important, but the abomination is still waiting to happen. Yes, Antiochus Epiphanes was evil, and yes, he did wreck the temple and bring worship to an end, but this was not the trigger for the end times. The world did not end 3.5 years later, did it? Forget about the earthly Solomon's temple, which gets destroyed all the time. Both temple and abomination need to be reimagined. Antiochus Epiphanes is introduced like this, Daniel 8, verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and toward the pleasant land. And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host of the stars to the ground, and stamped on them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Now, we'll come back with a whole chapter on Antiochus Epiphanes, but scholars are pretty unanimous that this is a clear reference to AE. And this is the first of several other references to the Abomination of Desolation that culminates with Jesus speaking to his disciples with the caveat, let the reader understand. In other words, this is a challenging thing to understand. I mean, it's even hard to say. The term Abomination of Desolation can be written in several different ways depending on your translation. The concept can range from riding a pig to genetic cloning. Since I'm arguing for an epic understanding, I'm going to ignore pig riding and Solomon's temple as options, with the nebulous Sons of Perdition reference mentioned earlier. Let's look closer at the meaning of the phrase used. Shakuk Shoman. If Jesus had said, watch out, when you see Shakuk Shoman standing where it shouldn't be, the end times clock will start. You'd wonder, Who? What? English translators have struggled to give a clear understanding of the phrase Shakuk Shomin. Basically, the phrase translates to abomination of desolation. Clear? Well, dig deeper, and the explanation is that Shakuk is anything that pertains to idolatrous worship, and Shomin is a concrete form of that maketh desolation. I mean, this could be anything evil. Yet the background of this term dates back much older than Daniel. Apparently, the term Shakuk Shomin comes from an older phrase that means Baal of heaven, which was written as Baal Shamayim. Now, quick recap. Baal was the storm god of the Canaanites. Bad stuff. The Hebrews of Exodus and even Pharaoh, who named his daughter after Baal's sister Anath, had worship addiction issues with the golden cow god. Joshua had major issues with Baal worshippers too. I mean, Baal equals bad. My point? If the 7 heads are not connected by a big family tree, then what connects them? Their religion? Bringing up Antiochus Epiphanes gives me something else to ponder beside the genetic Frankenstein concept. This is how the book of Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 43, describes the situation. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandments of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion, and sacrificed unto idols, and profaned the Sabbath. His religion? The term Shakuk Shomin gives us a clue. What was Antiochus Epiphanes' religion? Worshipping Shakuk Shomin instead of God. So when we investigate the candidates for the 7 kings, we'll use this dark side of the force idea as a condition. Back to the beasts. So now that I've introduced you to the concepts behind the Antichrists, we'll do a deep dive into the past to meet some of our candidates. We'll get back to my DNA theory again, but I wanted to end with my formula for dividing up the candidates. As established by the Book of Revelation, the 5 plus 1 plus 1 equals 7 equals the 8th theory spells out that 5 kings came before the year 95 AD, over thousands of years. One of them was alive in 95 AD. That's quite easy. One of them will come after 95 AD. That's 2,000 years of choices. And the Antichrist will come in the final years of the end times. 7 verses 4. Since Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar both dreamed of the Antichrist and beasts, the key to narrowing things down might be found on those pages. Remember, Daniel is writing approximately 600 BC. While it is possible that all 7 kings were still in his future, nope, there are not 7 mentioned, just 4. 4. Obviously, numerous prophecies in Daniel pointed to Alexander the Great. It also seems pretty clear that Antiochus Epiphanes is called out. That leaves 2, Mr. 95 AD and Mr. 2K Future. There's 4. So what happened to the other 3? My theory is that those 3 came before Daniel. Nobody dreams about them or their kingdoms or their mountains because they've already lived and died. King Chad certainly dreams of Mr. Potato Head number 8, the Antichrist, as well as some major historical plot points, but nobody dreams backwards to the past. So our search will be defined by someone born prior to 600 BC, someone who worshipped Shakuk Shomin, someone who has any connection to perdition talk, and someone who God foreshadows with a shout-out. Why shout-out? Heck, the king of Easter Island could have been one of the most vile human beings to ever walk the earth. But it isn't in God's style to not warn us. He loves the I told you so hot kitchen stove lessons, doesn't he?